Hello, guys and girls, and welcome to station number 2. At this station today, you are going to be filling out the paper that you see on the screen here in front of you. If you don't already have a copy of this paper, please make sure that you get one out of the green folder that is on top of the podium before moving on. As you guys know, all of our stations that we are working on today are all focused about writing an introduction paragraph. So at this station, we are in fact going to be writing an introduction paragraph. We have a prompt down at the bottom of the front sheet. We have a few blanks that we're going to be filling in up at the top of the front sheet. And then if you flip your paper over to the back, you are going to see basically like an outline of an introduction paragraph that we're going to be going through and filling in the blanks. Now, I do want to go ahead and give you guys a heads up and let you know that this station might be one of the most important stations that you're going to visit today. And that is because on Friday this week, you all will be writing an introduction paragraph independently. So today with this station, I'm going to give you lots of support. We're going to talk through things. But on Friday, you're just going to have a prompt and you're going to have a piece of paper, and it's going to be your job to write all of these things independently. So with all of that being said, we are going to jump in here and get started. Again, please make sure you have this paper in front of you. Make sure you have a pencil. And once you've got those things, you are going to be ready to go. Now, before I talk about what needs to be filled in these blanks up at the top, I actually want to look at the prompt first. So the prompt is on the first page at the bottom, and it starts with the writing situation. I'm going to read it, and I would like for you to follow along with me as I read. It says, lately there have been some television shows on channels like the Comedy Channel and MTV that pull crazy stunts that warn they should not be tried at home. Some pick on perfect strangers, and others border on risky and dangerous behavior for the pranksters themselves. Recently, MTV removed one of these shows from the air due to the fact that too many teens copied the pranks they saw on the show and either got hurt themselves or hurt others. Write a letter to the executives at MTV supporting or opposing their decision to remove shows like this from the air. Now, this is a pretty stereotypical prompt that you might see with some on-demand writing. It has presented an argument, it has presented a debate. And this particular prompt is specifically focusing on prank shows. And it talks about how some people feel like prank shows should be taken away because they're dangerous. People are copying the pranks and they're getting injured. But others think that it's just harmless fun, so there's no need to get rid of these shows. Either way, when we are getting ready to write our introduction paragraph, the very first thing that we are going to write is our hook. Okay, we always want to start with a hook. You've heard me say it over and over. Just like if we're going fishing, we want to make sure we have a hook to catch the fish. When we are writing, we start with a hook to grab the reader's attention. There are 3 different types of hooks that you can choose to start your on-demand essays with. And so we're quickly going to recap those. The first is a question hook. And I guess I'll go ahead and add here that if you see me add something to my copy here on the screen, you need to make sure you are adding it to your copy that you have in front of you. Question hooks are my personal favorite type of hook because I think that they're the easiest. A lot of times, if you look in the prompt itself, you might find a question that you could actually just borrow for your hook. But again, I just think they're the easiest. You ask a question that's related to the prompt in some way, and it gets your audience thinking about what you are going to be writing about. So question hook is the first type. The second type of hook is a fact hook, a surprising fact. And we know that facts are not something that can just be made up. So if you're going to use a surprising fact or an interesting fact, that would need to come from a reliable source, like a passage that maybe you are provided before you actually start writing. And then the last type of hook is an anecdote, or sometimes we call that a short story hook. These type of hooks are really brief, which can be difficult if you're trying to give a full story in just a few sentences. But it's putting a scenario out there that your audience can relate to in some way, and that obviously relates to the prompt as well. So if we go to the second page, go ahead and flip your paper over. I have actually started the hook for you, and we're just going to be filling in the blanks. Like I said, my personal favorite type of hook to use is a question hook, which is why we see a question mark here at the end of our first sentence. But here's what we've got. It says, should networks like blank and blank ban stunt shows? So when you're writing your introduction paragraph, my advice is always going to be to work smarter and not harder. So here's what I mean by that. You can get lots and lots of information from the prompt itself that's going to help you write your introduction paragraph. So what I mean is, like here, should networks like blank and blank ban stunt shows? We can go back to the prompt and see what networks, what channels were discussed, and we can use those to fill in our blanks. So if we look at the very first sentence of the prompt, it says, lately there have been some television shows on channels like the Comedy Channel and MTV that pull crazy stunts that they warn should not be tried at home. So all we're going to do, guys, is take the Comedy Channel and fill it in on our first blank, and we're going to take MTV and fill it in on our second blank. Again, if I put anything on my copy, you need to make sure you are adding it to your copy as well. So that takes care of the hook for us. We started with a question hook. Should networks like the Comedy Channel and MTV ban stunt shows? I'm going to flip back over to the front. We're going to talk about background information next. Remember, background information comes right after our hook, and the job of the background information is to tell our audience what we're writing about and why it is important. And to do that, we're going to have 3 sentences in our background information, and each of those sentences is going to answer a different question. So sentence number 1 is going to tell us, what is the debate? In other words, what is it that people are arguing about? If we think about this prompt specifically, we know that people are arguing about these specific shows being taken off the air. So I'm going to go back down. Let's look at our next sentence. This has recently become a topic of debate due to some teens blank. Remember, work smarter, not harder. So we're going to go back to the prompt and see what have some teens been doing as a result of these shows. So if I look again at the very first sentence, it says, lately there have been some television shows on channels like the Comedy Channel and MTV that pull crazy stunts that they warn should not be tried at home. Some pick on perfect strangers, others border on risky and dangerous behavior for the pranksters themselves. Recently, MTV removed one of these shows from the air due to the fact that, here's the key here, many teens copied the pranks they saw on the show and either got hurt themselves or hurt others. So that's the information that we're going to take and include in this next blank. We don't necessarily want to copy it word for word from the text here, but we're going to take the similar idea and we're going to put it into our own words. So we're going to say, this has recently become a topic of debate due to some teens copying the pranks from the show and getting hurt. Okay, so again, the first sentence of our background information needs to tell our audience what is the debate. And the debate is that some teens are copying these pranks, they're getting hurt, and so some people think that these shows should be taken off the air. You guys obviously have the ability to pause the video if you need to, so feel free to do that. After we have the first sentence of our background information stating what is the debate, our next sentence is going to let our audience know what, sorry guys for the all capitals, what do those in favor argue? So those who are okay with these prank shows, why do they think these prank shows are okay? Those who are in favor of them, why do they feel that way? So if we go back down to the bottom, despite these injuries, those in favor of prank shows argue blank. So for this one, we can just use some background knowledge to understand or to fill this in. Obviously, people like these prank shows for a couple of different reasons. Maybe because they think they're funny, maybe because they think they're entertaining. And so we're going to include those two reasons here. Despite these injuries, those in favor of prank shows argue they are funny and entertaining. Okay, I want you guys to notice that we have not given our personal opinion yet. We are just letting the audience know what is the debate, why are some people in favor, and now we're going to give the opposite side. So instead of saying what those in favor believe, now we're going to provide a sentence that lets our audience know what do those opposed argue. In other words, the people who are against these prank shows, why are they against them? So if we go back down, our next sentence starter said, however, those opposed feel blank. We can go back up and look back at the prompt here. I'm going to highlight a few of the key things. For example, right here it says, others border on risky and dangerous behavior for the pranksters themselves. So if we're going to summarize, those opposed feel that these shows are dangerous and risky. Okay, so to recap everything that we've read so far, should networks like the Comedy Channel and MTV ban stunt shows? This has recently become a topic of debate due to some teens copying the pranks from the show and getting hurt. Despite these injuries, those in favor of prank shows argue they are funny and entertaining. However, those opposed feel these shows are dangerous and risky. Now we're going to get to the final part of the introduction, which is our thesis statement. For our thesis statement, we have to choose a side of the debate. So we have to decide, do we personally think that prank shows are good or bad? Then we're going to restate the question that is being asked to us. In other words, the question here is, should these shows be banned? And when we reflect, or when we restate, we're going to make sure that that restatement reflects our personal opinion. So we're going to say the shows should or the shows should not be banned. And then remember, the key number to remember with thesis statements is 2. So after we choose our side, then we're going to give 2 reasons for why we feel that way. So since I'm doing this one for you, I'm going to choose the side of the debate. Either way, the evidence is clear. Prank shows, we're going to say should be banned. So go ahead and circle the word should. They should be banned because, and now we have to give 2 reasons. And obviously the big thing that was highlighted in the prompt was that they're dangerous. So I'm going to say they should be banned because they could lead to young people injuring themselves. That's going to be my first reason, but remember, we always want to list 2 reasons in our thesis statement. So my next reason is also going to be focused on the topic of how it's dangerous, but instead of talking about how they could injure themselves, I'm going to say, and they could cause injury to others. All right, so if we recap it, put it all together, should networks like the Comedy Channel and MTV ban stunt shows? This has recently become a topic of debate due to some teens copying the pranks from the show and getting hurt. Despite these injuries, those in favor of prank shows argue they are funny and entertaining. However, those opposed feel these shows are dangerous and risky. Either way, the evidence is clear. Prank shows should be banned because they could lead to young people injuring themselves and they could cause injury to others. This is what a correctly written introduction paragraph should look like. We have the hook, we have the background, we have the thesis statement, and just keep in mind you guys are going to be writing one of these independently on Friday. I want you to keep this paper with you. I'm not going to take it. I want you to have it as a resource for when you write your introduction on Friday. So fold it up. You're not going to glue it in your notebook, but stick it inside your notebook. That way you have it as a resource and you are finished with your work for Station 2.